to be here. I have a, sort of long, we actually at Directi have a long history with ISB. It's one of our, or I would say the favorite institution that we visit every year. So kudos to you guys for that. I'm generally here like twice a year. In fact, sometimes 3 times a year in terms of talks and placements. And so you'll see me again in the placement week with a huge contingent of people. I was just talking about that with a few of the ISB folks below. We have a lot of ISB alums at Directi, and it's always been sort of a fun relationship. So thank you for inviting me, and really excited to be here. So today, what I'm going to do, I'm going to quickly take you through sort of a presentation that that covers, in some sense, my entrepreneurial journey, or at least some aspects of it, and really focuses on some lessons that I learned along the way, or that I imbibed along the way, or that drive me, or that are responsible for the kind of success that we've created at Directi as an organization. How many of you guys were here for our presentation just last week? Okay, so bulk of you at least are generally aware of our organization and what all we do. At the end of it, feel free to ask me questions about anything about us, about our recruitment process, about this presentation, etc. But really the goal here is not to cover Directi, but more to cover and potentially inspire you guys to do something similar, and to really innovate and change the status quo and do interesting things in life. And so these lessons I'm going to talk about are not just, well, they can clearly be applied to entrepreneurship, but they're more like life lessons also in many ways. And I'm quite certain you should be able to apply them to many different facets of life. So quickly, I'll just spend 2 slides on at least some of you guys who may not necessarily be aware of Directi. Directi is an organization that was started back in 1998. So it's kind of like a group within which we have many different businesses, more than 11, 12 businesses. This is a subset of the brands that we operate within Directi across 3 to 4 different verticals. Each of our businesses amongst the top 5 or 10 worldwide in its respective space. The group as a whole is give or take, net worth about $450 million. The interesting and unique characteristic about our group, and again, I'm not in any way proposing this as a formula for success, but it just happened to be so for us, is that we're entirely bootstrapped. So unlike most organizations that you read about these days, we have never taken on a single dollar of external funding. We've never taken on any debt in our organization. We're entirely debt free. So that's kind of unique, and we're sort of proud of that in many ways. So you guys have probably encountered some of these brands, though Riva's kind of our latest business started just about a year and a half ago, and our first set of products were launched 6 months ago. It's an entire B2C play on communications. And again, I'm happy to cover more details about this stuff at the end of the presentation if people have questions about any particular business unit or any particular product, or in general, why, what, where, anything that you feel like. We're close to about 1,300 plus employees and growing. I think now we're about 1,400 or so. We add another 250 odd this year, and hopefully we'll continue to sort of grow at the same pace next year. And so now, as I said, the goal for me is to come here and talk to you guys about and inspire you guys in the same way that I have been inspired and driven to run this organization and grow it to where it is at. And so let's start with the first lesson. And this is basically, choose a career in something you would gladly do for free. Nobody had to pay me a single buck to do what I was doing right now. All of that is kind of a side effect, right? So choose a career in something that you don't care about the money, that you would gladly do for free. Let me sort of relate this back to my entrepreneurial journey, which in many ways started back in 1989. I was 9 years old in 6th grade. This is what I look like. Not the most flattering picture. I wasn't the first to be picked up on any sports teams and whatsoever. Huge glasses, tiny frame. So yeah, in an all-boys school, which kind of helped in some way. I'm sure it contributed a lot, by the way, because there were no distractions. And a lot of the formative stuff in terms of who I am today is kind of defined by those years, And so, what's more important is computers looked like this back then. Many of you guys might not even have seen these, but these are like huge, bulky, green monochrome terminals with 5 1/4 inch floppy drives. There were no hard disks. There was no internet back then. Yes, there was a world without the internet, as we're all aware. And for me, it was love at first sight. I was in 6th grade. It's the first time when the school actually set up a computer. I was in a school called Arya Vidya Mandir in Mumbai, in Bandra. And the school set up a computer lab with 13 computers. We were the second batch to pass out of that school, so we had about 60 students, but only about 11 of us were elected for computers. So we had one dedicated computer for each of us, and I would spend every single possible like free amount of slotted time that I could in my entire school duration in the computer room. So short breaks, 15 minutes about every day, lunch breaks, which were about half an hour, every PT class that I could skip. And after school, so my computer teacher was kind enough to like give me the keys to the computer room. So every day I would lock up the computer room, like I would stay behind 2 to 3 hours every day after school and sit and write programs, build software, take back then we used to program in GW Basic on MS-DOS and literally take GW Basic to a point where it was unimaginable. The kind of stuff that I wrote back then, I'm really proud of even today. We used to have these school projects that we had to build, which most people in various schools would take like about a week and a half to build their school projects. Then you demo them, they get counted as part of your practicals, and you get scored out of like 20 marks on them. I used to spend 6 to 7 months writing that project, like building that project. And I'd build these elaborate games, with like the stock market and with like, various different like angles and background music and graphics and whatever not, just, sheer fun. It was like awesome fun. I used to conduct classes after school for the teacher and all the students on advanced programming in Basic. And so, and the reason why I'm telling you all these things, guys, is nobody had to pay me at that point in time to do any of that. It wasn't work. It was an area that I was really passionate about. I loved math and physics. And so logical reasoning and puzzle solving and therefore computer programming was sort of a natural progression. And it was my passion. I really knew at that point in time that, oh my God, this stuff is going to change the world. I really love doing it, and this is what I'm going to build out my career in. I read tons of books at that point in time, and like upwards of about 30-40 different books on advanced programming in Basic, etc. And really self-taught, because there was nobody else to teach me at that point in time. So really self-learned all this stuff and got to a point where I did pretty well as far as comp sci was concerned. And so this is what I want to talk about in the first lesson, which is that success is a side effect of passion. It's not the other way around. You find something that you're really passionate about, and success will automatically come. So that's really the first step that you want to take. I want to quote one of my favorite quotes. Steve Jobs says, "Find something you love to do so much that you can't wait for the sun to rise to do it all over again." And that's how I felt about computer programming and software development. I would come back from school, and back then we were a relatively small family, and we couldn't afford a computer back at home. And so I would go back home, I would read a bunch of books, take down my notes, and I couldn't wait for the next day to begin and the first few periods to get over, so this short break starts and I can go to the computer room and try out like my first 15 lines of code. Like I couldn't wait for the sun to rise so that I could do it all over again. So lesson number 1, choose a career in something that you would gladly do for free. Success will follow by default. Lesson number 2, have crazy conviction in yourself. Entrepreneurs will get tested on this n number of times throughout their journey. And so this brings me to 1994. This is when I was in 10th standard. So everybody here knows in India it's like 10th and 12th are like the defining years of your life, and they'll decide everything that you do and whatever not, and parents are all stressed about it. And so clearly by that time I'd made up my mind that I wanted to do something in computer science, and I knew I wanted to do something on my own. I didn't want to sort of take up a job somewhere, so I wanted to start my own business in computers. And I'm a kid, back then. And so everybody that I talk to tells me that, well, if you want to do something in computer science, you have to get into computer engineering. You have to get into a good college. You have to study hard, get good sort of PCM scores, and whatever not. So like a good boy, I did all that in my 10th grade, was a merit list holder, 12th in the country, got a good seat in 11th and 12th in a, then a good a good science college, Ruparel. I don't know how many people here know of Ruparel in Mumbai. I don't know its reputation now, but back then it was like, it was like a college for the geeks in some sense. Had a pretty high cutoff and whatever not. I'm sure other colleges had some amazing education also, but just, I guess from a cutoff standpoint, it was right up there. So yeah, a lot of people insisted that, yeah, I should get into a good college. I should study for, IIT JEE. And so did all of that stuff in terms of studying for my JEE during my 11th and 12th and so on and so forth. Before you guys by default, by now I think I've sort of tarnished my reputation here a bit. So before you guys start boxing me into this, this guy is a geek, goes to geeky colleges and whatever not, I must clarify that Aishwarya and I also went to the same college. So did Urmila Matondkar, but not when I was there. But those were 2 really fun years of my life in terms of I did a lot of interesting stuff in math, physics, and comp sci, which was entirely outside of the curriculum. The curriculum was crap. I'm sorry to say that, but really all the stuff they were teaching out there are already done. And by the time I was, going through 11th grade, etc., I looked up all the sort of reference material of what they teach in comp sci in engineering, and this is in no way to diminish what all of you engineers have done out here. So please don't get me wrong. But I was, after going through that curriculum, I was like, this stuff doesn't make any sense. Some of the stuff they taught, was like so old, it made no sense anymore. And most of the stuff I already knew. So I was kind of, at that point, I was quite disillusioned with the whole notion of spending 4 more years after already spending 2 years, where I wasn't really learning much in college. I had this quirky professor in college who, outside of college stuff, would teach me and 2 other guys like some bizarre stuff in like math and physics and whatever not. But so everything that I learned sort of outside the curriculum. And I was like, I don't want to spend 4 more years doing this. And so by the time 12th grade came along, I already decided that this is it for me. Formal education is sort of passé. And of course, I had the laurels of Bill Gates and whoever else, Steve Jobs and everybody else to sort of point out to and say, look, this doesn't make sense anymore. And I was raring to go. Like, I wanted to start something. So I was like, damn it, I don't want to waste 4 more years. I have to start something now. And so, obviously, again, as I said, 10th and 12th are like the deciding years of your life, right? And my parents were clearly not happy with the decision at all. So when I decided to drop out and say that, okay, I don't want to do any of this, I want to start out on my own, they spent no effort, spared no effort rather, sorry, in telling me that I was making the biggest mistake of my life, the absolute biggest mistake whatsoever. Forget them not sparing any effort. My dad's actually, very, sort of, I would say, he's amazing at process and whatever. He engineered and tons of meetings of like people would coming over, relatives and friends and like engineers who've passed out of good colleges from abroad and India and whatever not would randomly drop in for dinner and then would randomly want to have a conversation with me on the side, telling me that I'm making the biggest mistake of my life, that I have great prospects, I have a good, good education, good background, good scores, etc. And it became even more intensive after I got my 12th results, because now I had the opportunity to sort of go into an engineering school and whatever not. And so it just became real crazy. And I must have been, like I said, I was a 12th standard kid. And by the way, these are people that I respect. People who are intelligent, they're not talking nonsensical stuff. What they're saying makes logical sense. They're smart people. They've, built their own careers in their own right, etc., including businessmen and whatever not. And I even, in fact, literally remember this like 2.5 to 3 months when this was literally an everyday occurrence. Every day or second day, there would be somebody on the phone or visiting our house or whatever not, and trying to talk me out of this. And so I must have been really like doggone stubborn at that point to say, I mean, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but what you say doesn't make sense. And I know what I'm talking about. And at 12th standard as a kid, etc., to sort of have that kind of conviction is, I mean, now when I think of it in hindsight, it's a tough situation. But in many ways, if that hadn't happened, there's honestly a possibility that we wouldn't be, where we were here today. If I had decided to go down the path of, okay, everybody seems to be saying this, and there's not one single person, not one person, by the way, at that point. It's another matter now that many of those guys are coming back and telling their sons to follow my example. But the fact is, not one single person would tell me that what I was doing was right. And it takes, so, I mean, seriously, and it's not even that I was thinking about it. For me, it was just like, I had shut off my mind saying that these guys are crazy. They don't know what they're talking about. I was the one who was crazy probably. And that's the kind of conviction that you need as an entrepreneur. That, holy crap, I mean, I don't know what these guys, I know what I know, and I'm going to go for it, right? So I want to, quickly play this video for you guys that you guys might have seen. Oh, sorry, my bad.
Never let somebody tell you
Just a second. I need to move this there. There you go.
All right. Don't ever let somebody tell you you can't do something. Not even me. All right? You got a dream, you got to protect it. People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it. You want something, go get it. Period.
So that's from Pursuit of Happiness, I think, with Will Smith. And you know, I love that that dialogue, which is, you know, don't ever let somebody tell you that you can't do something. If you want something, go get it, period. That's the way I felt back then in 12th standard, when everybody was telling me that you can't do this. This is not the right approach. You go through your education and whatever not, and you know, then figure out how you want to do this. And this is exactly how I felt. The one good thing is that my dad, you know, supported me through the decision. So he would spare no efforts in telling me literally every day that I was making, you know, a big mistake. But he said, you know, finally it's your mistake to make. And so, you know, if you finally do decide to go down that path and, you know, waste your life, then I will help you, and, you know, I'll help you throughout the process. And so that's, you know, that certainly helped. I didn't actually drop out of college. I eventually went into, just again, this was largely to satisfy their, you know, their needs and their desires, but I ended up taking commerce, which doesn't really take away much of your time. I joined a college called, again, not to diminish the importance of, but it's true, and you know, I attended this college called Sidnam in Mumbai, and in Sidnam we have a saying that Sidnam has the most outstanding students in Mumbai because they're always standing outside college. So, so I did 3 years of BCom. I never attended except for exam time, which is interesting because a lot of people didn't attend during exam time and attended the rest of the time. Especially, you could literally map out the attendance and, you know, attach a formula associated with whether there was a cricket match taking place that day or not, in terms of, you know, whether people would come for exams or not. But anyways, so don't ever let someone tell you that you can't do something. And in many circumstances, it's unfortunate, but the people who tell you this are often the people who are closest to you. And then it becomes even more difficult, right? For me, it was the people who were literally the closest to me. You know, my cousins, my brothers and sisters, my parents, my relatives, etc. They're the ones telling you, you can't do this. You know, it doesn't make sense. And, you know, it's tough to sort of then fight that off. So going back to the lesson that I spoke about, have crazy conviction in yourself, right? You know, don't ever let somebody tell you that you can't do something. Lesson number 3, if at first you don't succeed, try and try again. Again, something that as an entrepreneur, you will go through n number of times. It sort of also ties into the fact that you need to have crazy conviction in yourself, right? So now this is 96, and I've kind of passed out of my 12th standard and just started Sidnam, FI BCom. And, you know, I did a bunch of stuff at that point in time. I was learning, and I was earning by doing consulting. So I would set up networks for people. I would write some tiny software for someone, and so on and so forth. And then back in 96, I started my first company. I very creatively named it Bits and PCs. So, and yeah, I'm good at that kind of stuff. And so this company was meant to, you know, I did a lot of software stuff, but I didn't know much about hardware, and I figured, let me try and start assembling computers and selling them and so on and so forth. So that's what the company did. And I would go door to door in car and Santa Cruz and whatever and sell computers to people. It was good fun for almost 6-8 months, etc. Except that, you know, didn't really make much money. In fact, probably lost some. And so it was a failure in that sense, but taught me a lot in terms of sort of going out there and meeting people, and, you know, as a kid pitching sort of my services and my sort of assembled computers, etc. Lots of people, and had lots of interesting experiences. You know, people inviting me and talking to me for hours at end, not buying anything at the end of it, but but nonetheless, talking to me, and spending their time with me and sharing experiences. It was a fun time. But complete disaster. I think about 8-9 months later, I eventually realized that this is not going to be it. In any case, hardware wasn't my passion, so I wasn't part of the reason probably why it didn't succeed, because in any case it was kind of like, okay, experimentation and let's see how it goes, etc. And so somewhere towards the end of 96, early 97, this is when the internet started really growing momentum or gaining sort of momentum in the country. It actually came in somewhere around 94, so we were already using the internet in 11th and 12th to a very limited extent. I don't know how many people sort of remember internet connection back then, but modems used to make funny sounds and give you like a 2400 bits per second speed, disconnect every 5 minutes. There wasn't much like graphics, etc. Most of the internet, in fact, was text oriented, and we didn't have any Google. Yahoo was there. There were some bizarre search engines that you won't even hear of today, Alta Vista and Metacrawler and whatever not. But it was amazing. I was hooked on passionately. VSNL was the only ISP in the country, and they used to sell these two internet plans, text plan and a TCP/IP sort of graphics oriented plan, etc. Through some interesting approaches, etc. For at least a few years at that point in time, I never had to pay for my internet connectivity. Since this is being recorded, I'm going to say that I'm not proud of that. But basically, when the internet came in, I was kind of hooked on. I was like, this is going to, not just computer science and not just software development, etc. But this is going to really change the way we live, the way we operate, the way we do business, the way we work out. It's going to impact everything, like our personal lives and our work lives. So back then, I was clear this is going to change the world. And so I knew that whatever I did in computers, I wanted to do it from an internet-based focus. And that's, if you look at Directi today, actually, everything that we do in some form or the other is all sort of internet related. And so I started my next company called the Web Spinners. Said I'm good at this kind of stuff. And so the Web Spinners was meant to, was a business that I started to build websites and develop web applications for people, webify people's sort of stuff, businesses and whatever not. And so I learned HTML, CSS, back then, Perl and CGI for sort of building dynamic applications, and wrote applications for a bunch of created some websites for a bunch of people, etc. And ran this for quite some time, for about 10, 11 months, etc. And didn't really do well. Made like marginal amounts of money, but learned a lot again through this entire experience. And so at the end of about 10, 11 months, etc., I realized I don't want to sit and do, and that's when it sort of hit me that I don't want to sit and do anything custom, where the growth of our business is proportionate to the number of people that we have, because that's what you would do in a custom software development company or a web development company, etc. Now I want to build my own products that I can then provide. Then millions of people can use those products. I don't have to like go out there and individually sort of sell these products and services to each company. And so in 1997, for the first time, I started Directi, and I started building a product, and I was super excited about it. I felt it would change the entire landscape and in the industry and whatever not, etc. And spent a lot of time, a year and a half, building this product, selling it, and so on and so forth. And it was a miserable failure. Okay, it was way ahead of its time. I was trying to automate the recruitment industry end to end by building a AI engine that will take away sort of the human element from matching resumes to jobs. So it's kind of like, you put in a bunch of jobs and you put in a bunch of candidates, and the engine will do all the work and figure out what's the right job for the right candidate, and so on and so forth. And I was super excited about the technology because I could only see the technology, right? I was like, this thing has so much potential. Like everybody, it'll put people out of jobs and change the economy and change the way people recruit and whatever not. But the truth is that the engine couldn't have actually worked unless there were at least like 500,000 people using it, because any AI engine needs a lot of data to operate to be able to actually generate relevant decisions. And there were 50,000 people connected to the internet at that point in time across the country. So the math doesn't add up. Like what was I thinking? For 1.5 years, I was blind to this fact. Like absolutely blind. I was like, why are people not biting? I mean, can't they see this? Like this is like revolutionary. Like this doesn't make any sense. And so as I said, I spent 1.5 years continuously coding, going out there, meeting up with placement agencies. I would spend 2 to 3 days in recruitment firms, seeing how they operate, seeing what they do on a day-to-day basis. What does a vacancy comprise of? What does a resume comprise of? What kind of fields? How do they match? What elements do they look at? And things like that. And I would go to large companies, and to their credit, while none of them would pay me to buy my software, they did spend a lot of time with me, and they would tell me, they would CEOs and chief HR guys and whatever would spend time with me because they were all intrigued. There's this little kid coming and talking about the internet. The internet was also new back then, so they're like, oh, this looks interesting and whatever not. And they spent time with me and they took me through their processes, and it was fun. But nobody was willing to pay for it. And so eventually, a year and a half later, it sort of it struck me that clearly this is not something that that's ever going to work out. And the math finally added up. And then that's when I sort of bought my first server and so on and so forth, and started sort of another business. But the important thing that I want to talk to you guys about, going back to sort of the lesson I spoke about, which is that if at first you fail, if you don't succeed, try again, because every failure is just sort of a stepping stone to success. And there's no journey of no entrepreneur, not one, unless you sort of got extremely lucky, completely randomly, that is not filled with tons of failures, because they're not really failures. They're actually different ways of learning how stuff is not going to work out, so that you can finally hit upon how stuff is going to work out. As Edison said, I now know, and the number varies depending on where you read this quote, but like 10,000 different ways of how to not make a light bulb work, and that's progress. How to to learn how to not do something is progress by itself. I want to play another video for you guys, so I'm going to just pop this up. Oh no, not this one. Just a second.
Oh, by rights we shouldn't even be here. We are. It's like the great stories, Mr. Furlong. The ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were. And sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was with so much bad happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing. The shadow, even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you. That meant something. Even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Furlong, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going. Because they were holding on to something.
I'm sure. But this is the point that I want to make to you. In the great stories that matter, the stories that people remember, you'll always find that folks in those stories had lots and lots of chances of turning back. And the difference between what makes that story great and what would not be that great a story is that they didn't turn back. They kept going. So yeah, that's lesson number 3, which is success is never ending and failure is never final. You guys have to sort of keep that quote and imbibe that. I'll actually talk about another story here, or like a parable that I heard or I read. And many of you might have read a long time ago. It's about this guy who's sort of passing by this village, and he sees this huge elephant that's chained to a wall. Well, not chained, but tied to a wall with like a rope. And so he's kind of perplexed by this, and he asked the sort of trainer of the elephant, or the mahout, or whatever they call them, and says that, how is it that this elephant, I mean, the rope looks pretty flimsy, how is it this elephant is sort of constrained by this rope, why doesn't he just break free and walk away? And so the trainer says that, when the elephant's a baby, we use the same rope to tie it. And at that point, the baby can't struggle and get away, and it's sort of attempted to try to get away, but it can't. And at some point, it just feels like there's no way that it's going to be able to break out of this rope. So even when that circumstance has passed, long gone, and now the elephant is way stronger, it's mentally conditioned to a point where it says, look, that rope is still going to hold me. So many of us lead our lives that way. We hold on to these failures that we've had in the past, these constraints that used to exist. And the whole world might have changed, and circumstances might have changed, and we've learned so much more, and we're far more capable. But we're still thinking back and saying, oh, wait a minute, but I don't think I can do this because I'm constrained. And so, winners never quit, and quitters never win. So that's the next lesson. If you don't succeed, try again. Lesson number 4 is, if you're going to spend time thinking, which all of us do at all points in time, you might as well think big. It takes the same amount of time, by the way. It doesn't take any extra time. And this is sort of back in '98 now, when, as I said, I sort of started out Directi in the first year of operations. Bought my first server. I actually borrowed about 25,000 rupees from dad. My first unofficial office was actually a kitchen platform. It was like one of those granite platforms of a kitchen. So we had an apartment that we had bought, which nobody was using. And so that was my computer desk. And I would actually sit out there and write my sort of software and go out there and try to sort of sell it and so on and so forth. And then eventually bought, as I said, borrowed 25 grand from dad, bought my first server. This is a web presence business, which still continues to run within the group till today. You guys know it as Big Rock, Reseller Club, Logic Boxes, webhosting.info, etc. Bought my first server in a company called Alabanza in the US, and in the first month and a half, recovered that money and had enough money to pay for the next 6 months, and then sort of kept growing from there in terms of staff and so on and so forth. That was actually our first office, and that's not a part of it, that's all of it. About like 150 square foot of space. There were about seats for 6 people. It's like a small place in dad's office. So dad's a chartered accountant, and he had an office, and in that there was a small room that we occupied. But even at that point in time, when we were really small, and I remember the first 4 employees, myself, my younger brother, 2 other employees, etc. And we were really small, but we had really big plans, and that was always one common factor across everything that we do. Is we're always thinking big. Back then, I had a handful of customers and a handful of employees, but I would spend so much time in sitting in, I built this entire automated invoicing system. So nobody has to do invoicing and collections. It just sort of happens automatically. I built this entire complex sort of automated support system. It wasn't even needed. There were like 100 customers. There were barely like a few phone calls in a day. But there was this whole notion of, oh no, but we're going to get to 1 million customers. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. And so we got to be ready. We got to be prepared. We got to build all these systems and put all these sort of, automation in place, and for HR, for all these practices. And even today, a lot of people that you'll meet in Directi are a testament of that we always believe in processes and automation preemptively to a point that you can't imagine, because we're always thinking in scale. But this was always the thought process from back then. You're always, always thinking big. I remember we wrote in 2000, I think it was in 2000 or 2001, I was sick and tired of collecting money from people through checks and cash. I'm like, this is just shitty, it doesn't make any sense. And so I went out there to try and figure out, credit card payments, how to make them happen, and realized there's nobody out there offering credit card payments. So in order to sort of, facilitate credit card payments, I wrote our first payment gateway. We sat and built it ourselves, saying that, okay, we'll use it to collect payments, but we don't want to do this situation of having to send a peon to somebody's office and he sits out there for 4 hours waiting for a check while the boss is inside. It's just ridiculous. It makes no sense. And that became a product line of ours, and we provided that to tons of other customers. We became sort of India's largest payment gateway, sold off that business later on. But the fact is, we were always thinking about automating and scaling, always thinking big. And so let me spend a little bit of time on this. I actually want to talk a bit about this, and I have some aspects here that I want to cover about thinking big, which is that if you think big, you will achieve big by default. Somehow or the other, you'll find whether you think big or you think small, the universe is going to conspire along with you to make it happen. And I'm not talking about spiritual forces at work. I'm too much of a science guy to believe in that stuff. But the truth is there's logic behind this. You will start observing stuff that you've not observed before simply because you're thinking big. Stuff will come to you, your attention, opportunities will open up, not magically, but because they were there, but now you notice them because you're thinking big. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have faced this experience, but many times it'll happen that you learn a new word that you never knew before, and immediately after learning it, suddenly you start seeing it everywhere. And it's not that it suddenly started appearing everywhere after you learned the word hello. It was always there. But because you've learned it now, it's become a part of your conscious. And therefore, when you see it, it actually comes to your attention. The same thing applies to all of our thoughts. So if you're thinking big, if you're thinking I want 1 million customers, opportunities that will get you 1 million customers will automatically become apparent to you. If you never think it, those opportunities will always remain invisible, just like not learning a word, because if you don't learn it, you won't see it. The same way, if you think big, you will automatically see opportunities that were otherwise completely invisible to you in the first place. So that's one of the important advantages of sort of thinking big. The other thing that I've observed that I want to talk about is that whether you pursue something big or small, you're always going to face hurdles that are always going to require creativity, effort, and hard work to solve. And the funny thing is that beyond a certain point, whether you're facing a big challenge or a small challenge, the amount of effort required is the same. You and me both have the same 24 hours in the day that Mark Zuckerberg has, or Bill Gates had, or Warren Buffett has, or whatever not. We all have the exact same amount of time. It's your choice to decide focusing that time on big problems or focusing that time on small problems. Both ways, you're going to focus the exact same amount of time on that problem, and they're going to require the exact same amount of creativity and effort to solve. In fact, the brain, much like any other muscle, automatically gets used to solving the kind of problems you throw at it. Just like your biceps, mine are not very good, but if you exercise them constantly, they will be able to take greater and greater weight. The same way, if you exercise your brain constantly with bigger and bigger problems, the bigger problems will appear to you the same way that a smaller problem used to appear to you a while ago. So by default, thinking big continuously exercises your brain further and further, and automatically gears you to be able to solve big problems the same amount of time that you would solve smaller ones. And then the last part is that each of us, each of you guys know that you only grow by stretching yourselves beyond what you were capable of. If you keep doing exactly what you were capable of, then that's your limit, and you're not going to grow beyond that. It's when you're exercising again, it's the last few reps where you're actually stretching beyond that point where it's like, damn it, I can't do any more, and you do a few more. That's actually what's building your muscle. The rest of it is just getting you to that point, right? So it's beyond that stretching point when you're actually stretching and expanding your capabilities. Same premise applies to our thoughts and our brain, right? Which is that if we take a problem that's going to take us outside our comfort zone, that's going to be slightly beyond our reach or significantly beyond our reach, whichever way you look at it, that's when you're going to stretch your capability. So, the reason I'm delving on this is that a lot of people talk about think big, but castles don't get created just because you dream about them. The truth is they do. Just by thinking big, you will automatically derive these 3 benefits without doing anything else. Of course, you have to work for the rest of the stuff, but without doing anything else, just by choosing to think big as opposed to thinking small, you automatically derive these 3 benefits that you would otherwise not derive, which is you'll observe and spot opportunities, you will stretch yourselves and expand your capabilities, and as I said, that you basically, it takes the same amount of effort either ways. So anyways, those are the 3 things that I wanted to sort of talk about. And so as I said, we're always thinking big, and we started off with this sort of small space, and we grew to larger spaces and grew further until now we have offices at 8 different locations around the world, close to about 1,500 people, and are still growing. And so I'll end with these 2 quotes on this particular lesson, which is a quote by Bill Gates, and you guys will realize this. Most of us will always overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year, because we're always behind at the end of the year, but we always underestimate what we can do in 10 years. You can't imagine the amount of stuff that this room is capable of doing in the next 10 years. It's mind-boggling. So, if you dream it, you can do it. And this brings me to my last lesson, lesson number 5, which is purpose of life is to live a life of purpose. I'll talk about a story out here again, parable that you guys might have heard of, which this guy's sitting on the beach, just relaxing there, and he happens to see this other man walking down the shore, and every now and then he sort of bends down and he picks like a starfish that's lying there on the shore and he tosses it back into the ocean. And he's doing this continuously as he walks along the shore. And so this guy the guy who's sitting and relaxing is like super curious, like what is this guy doing? Why is he doing it, etc. And so he goes up and walks up to this guy and he's like, well, what are you doing? I've been observing you from there. And so this guy is like, oh, these starfishes have been sort of washed ashore, and if they remain outside the ocean, they'll die. And so I'm picking them up and tossing them back into the ocean, and so that they can live. And so this guy's like, yeah, but why are you doing this? Like, what's the point? Like, what difference is it going to make? Like, why are you doing this, kind? So, like, what's the difference? And so the other person doesn't really answer that question. Instead, he walks a few steps, picks up another starfish, tosses into the ocean, turns around and says, it made a difference to that one. And the point that I'm trying to make out here is that when you make an impact, even if the impact is as small as saving a dying starfish from the ocean shore, but when you make an impact, suddenly a mundane task becomes so much more exciting, and you'll feel so much more driven and motivated for it, right? And so if you make your life sort of a life of purpose, saying that I'm going to make an impact, that's for me the reason why I'm doing all of this, and why I do what I do and why I love what I do, is to make an impact, is to make a difference. And then all the things that I do in my life, including mundane things like come here to ISB and give a talk, I didn't mean that, but I'm saying any activity is irrelevant. The activities are not they're just a means to the end. But the end goal is so much more loftier, and that's what drives you. That's what creates the purpose. If you bought like an expensive car, a Ferrari, and just had it sit in your garage and do nothing, if it made no impact to your life, that would be such a waste. Like, everybody out here sitting and thinking, who'd do that? Like, why would you ever do that? But we've been given machines that are so much more powerful and that can do so much more than any machine that we can ever make, because they're our creations. That's us. And so many of us end up just sitting and wasting our potential or not using it to the fullest extent. It's like sitting, a Ferrari sitting in a garage and doing nothing. Logically, that doesn't make sense. And the exact same way, logically, it doesn't make sense to not utilize yourself to your absolute fullest potential. So my objective and my goal in life would be that when I look back at the end of my life, I want to be able to say to myself that, well, I made an impact, a large enough impact, and that the world was different because of me. Because the world wasn't different because of me, and if I just cease to exist, which all of us will at some point in time, and post my ceasing to exist, if the world was exactly the same way as it was, then I might as well have not existed. As a corollary, people who sort of derive stuff will appreciate this. As a corollary, therefore, the purpose of my existence is to make an impact, right? Because otherwise, there was no purpose or reason for my existence. Choose to create an outcome that is worthwhile. So I want to actually get you guys, and this is going to be a bit cheesy, but but I'll do it nonetheless. I want all of you guys to repeat this after me. So, all of you, I commit that I will spend my life in making a positive and lasting impact to this world that is proportionate to my potential. Thank you. That's basically it. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Forum's open for any questions that you want to ask, including why I've been flipping my finger at all of you guys throughout the evening. Guys, any question? Do you have a question to ask? That's the answer. Exactly. That's the answer to your question. But yeah, there's goodies for people who ask questions. Yes.
I had a question which is, longer run, when you have companies like Google and all which are coming up with so many innovations. So how do you see Directi's future, say 10 years down the line?
I mean, I think there's mutual inspiration and mutual respect. I have tremendous respect for organizations like Google, etc. And the same side, I continue to harbor a frustration that most of the innovation that we see is coming out of the sort of 40 square mile radius that we call the Silicon Valley. I mean, seriously, like we have 1 billion people in this country, and we don't have so many things happening. Though the last 2 years have been extremely positive for the country as a whole, but I think that's great. I forget Google and Microsoft and so on and so forth. There's a lot of stuff happening in our backyard. In fact, I say this to all my people on an ongoing basis that Directi has actually created a lot of entrepreneurs, people who sort of worked with us for a certain period of time and then decided to go out there and either compete with us in many cases, and which I'm very proud of because they've gone out there and sort of tried and built successful businesses out of their own ideas and innovation. So I would say amazing. The more the merrier, and it's a free market economy. All of us should play. I'll also say this that now in the last 3-4 years, and I can see that for the next decade or so, you guys are actually in the best possible situation. In some ways, I'm kind of, reducing our recruitment potential by doing this because I'm hoping some of you guys will sort of go out there and decide, screw jobs and whatever not, Cass can go to, wherever. I'm going to go out there and, do my own thing. But the point I'm trying to make is this decade has been by far the easiest decade for you to start a business in terms of lowest risk, highest access to capital, and highest returns to risk ratio in comparison to going out there and getting a job. And so it's times are by far the best for something like that. For Directi, to answer sort of the last part of your question, our goal is to continuously grow. I have lots of areas. Some people were asking me below. I have lots of areas. So every 2-3 years we start a new set of businesses. And then we sit and spend a lot of time and effort in building out those products, building out the teams, recruiting some of you people, putting you guys in sort of relevant positions, and eventually then getting out of the way and then starting the next thing. So every 2-3 years we repeat that cycle, which is why we are where we are. We start the next set of businesses. So right now, we're focusing on Radix, which is our new GTLD business, and Riva, which is our communications business. And of course, a lot of new products that we're working on in the online advertising business. Etc. But those are some of the newer ones that we've started. The older ones keep adding new products, but they don't need as much of top management attention. So 2-3 years from now, we'll start new stuff and so on and so forth. Eventually, my objective is that I can use all the capital and all of the stuff that we've acquired to make a difference in some way. And one of the areas that I'm passionate about, I said, is education. So yeah, let's see how things go. Please. Yeah, it's not a magic formula, by the way. I can honestly tell you that there are many businesses where you have to take external capital. There are many businesses where you may not, and things work out. Fortunately, areas that we've pursued have grown fairly fast organically. Also, using our own money makes us significantly more frugal in terms of making the right decisions and making sure that we don't, randomly spend. I don't know if any of you guys were around the .com one bust and days. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like people were, I remember reading articles about companies that installed like gold-plated urinals in their, restrooms, and with the funding they got and stuff like that. So it's ridiculous. Sometimes it cannot necessarily be great to have sort of lots of money, but that does not necessarily mean that there are times when we could have taken funding and grown in a different way. I think just strategically, we never felt the need at certain situations, and so we just didn't decide, we decided not to. So there were certainly offers. We did a minority divestment. Again, I guess some of you guys might be aware in our online advertising business in 2008, but now we bought back that stake again recently. So we again sort of own 100% of that. But it just somehow clicked, and it can go differently for different people. I'll tell you this, if at some point funding would have been the important reason for us to grow, I would have gone ahead and taken funding. So it wasn't that I chose explicitly to say, damn it, no, this is my fundamental principle and I'm not going to change it. It's not. It was just that we didn't need it, and so it didn't happen to come across as a part of our strategic plan. Yeah?
Very simple and personal question. last many years. What's the next big thing? Like what drives you right now for the next 10 years? Probably. Like you said, a lot can be done in the next 10 years. So what drives you right now?
If you're talking about specific industry, I'm very excited about the communication space. Reason being that the way I see it, for the last 20 years, there actually hasn't been much innovation in the space. Though the devices that we use have seen a world of change, from the rotary phones that we used to use back in the 90s to computers that each of us carry. But phone calls and communication are exactly the same. You have the same 7 features that used to exist back then, like call waiting, voicemail, and whatever not, etc. Forwarding, transfer, basic stuff. We dial numbers the same way. It's like a 10-digit phone number of some random person. Like nothing has changed in this space. So I mean, and somebody else asking this question below that how do you identify new opportunities that you want to pursue? And these are some of the variables that I look at. So an area that I'm passionate about, I'll look at. I'll pick up an industry that's big enough. Communications is a $1 trillion industry worldwide. An industry which hasn't seen much innovation because we're a tech company, we're innovative. So if there hasn't been much innovation, there's clearly a gap for us. Then I'll spend my time identifying that gap and figuring out what products we want to build to sort of fill that gap. So communications is what drives me right now.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if tomorrow an employee walks up to you and say, I have a good idea and this is what I have prepared. So how are you going to take it? And I require say $300,000 of funding.
So we're not currently doing any angel funding at all, only because the fact that we're so busy pursuing our own ideas. But we'll be more than happy to guide people to where they can. I actually don't think I'm the last person you should be taking money from, given that there's so much cheap money available out there that you might as well sort of go out there. People who are possibly less smarter than me and will take lesser dilution from you. But no, anyways, there's a lot of money available out there, and if you so a lot of people actually have done that with us. I mean, I see a lot of people who come up to me with their own ideas, etc. And I'll consult them in terms of my feedback, whether I think it's feasible or not, what I think the challenges would be. These days, in fact, there are like lots of models you can use on the internet to even identify whether a business plan is going to be successful. There are a series of questions you need to ask yourselves and figure out the answers to, etc. One of the fundamental things that I always talk about, this is actually from a book that I had read, is the notion of, to me, a successful business. There's always a successful business model if whatever you're doing is going to add more value to your consumers than the value that you're demanding back from them. So, for instance, we sell a web hosting package to a law firm, and if we charge $100 for it, it's a viable business if they're going to make more than $100 out of using that particular service. Otherwise, it's never going to be a viable business model. Otherwise, I'm trying to pull a fast one on them. So as long as you can come up with a space and a product, and in your mind you can figure out that, okay, this product is going to add value to consumers, and the amount that I require to provide this service will require me to charge X, but the value that will add to them is going to be a multiple of X, you've got a successful business model. But yeah, so we'll consult people, we'll assist them with their ideas and whatever not. We're currently not doing any funding from our side. And it's not because we have funds, we have capital. I'd love to, by the way. I'd love to get into that. It's just we don't have time right now. That's the only one sort of currency we lack. And so maybe in some time we're thinking about it. In the next 3-4 years, that we'll start actively investing in other startups, etc. ourselves. Yes?
You talked about your journey in 97 when you had the first attempt at Directi, and now you are having a lot more maturity in deciding the business knowledge of it, how to design business models. So how did this transition happen from being a technology freak to one who has a lot of business acumen? Was it self-learned, or did somebody guide you on the way?
I would not use the word freak, but since you, but I've been called. No, I take that as a compliment. But business acumen and tech knowledge, both for me were entirely self-learned, and that's the only way. Which is, by the way, the other reason I'm passionate about education. I think there's a lot of scope of innovation there. But the way I learned everything that I learned is all through reading, reading and trying. On my own, and this was back when the internet didn't exist. So it was like books and try stuff out, and books and try stuff out. Same for business. I think one of the things, part of the reason why I think I also got really motivated to become an entrepreneur, as well as gained a lot of perspective in terms of running businesses from, is by reading tons of biographies. I've probably read more than like 150 of them, like literally of every company you can possibly imagine. I started reading these back in school. and I would just devour biographies of like tech companies, non-tech companies, and you really get so much perspective. You get a sense of, well, everybody fails, everybody makes wrong decisions, wrong decisions that cost like tens of millions of dollars, and you make them and you live through them. And so there's a lot of perspective you gain, a lot of business acumen that you gain through that approach, through that process. Every failure teaches you. A lot of those sort of door-to-door sales processes that I myself went through in the early days. I would take field support calls, etc. myself, and so a lot of that teaches you, and you gain business acumen along the way. So it's a mixture of reading, practical experience, and so on and so forth. Again, that's not to say that there aren't better ways of doing it. I honestly believe that there are also a lot of like some B school courses are outstanding, and if I had that opportunity and if that would have been the right path at that point in time, who knows, maybe that's something I would have done. So it's to each his own. You foster your own path, but you figure out how you want to learn and what you need to learn, and you make a mistake and you identify what you did wrong, and then you fix it. Yes.
Till 98 you have explained that 4-5 failures.
So that was a web presence business that I spoke about, right? Which is that, so I figured that I was way ahead of my time in terms of, I knew I wanted to do something on the internet. I knew it had to be some sort of a product, some tech product that I had to provide. And clearly I couldn't build now. Sometimes I learned that lesson the hard way, that sometimes being too ahead of your time is also not the best thing. And a lot of people, a lot of companies actually in the .com 1.0 days have learned the lesson, learned that lesson the hard way. Facebook wasn't the first social network. Back, I don't know if again anybody remembers, back in the day, there used to be a social network called 6degrees.com, which was the world's first social network, which connected people and established connections and did all that stuff. But too ahead of its time, not enough traction, not enough people on the internet, and so on and so forth. So being ahead of your time is not always an advantage. So I figured I'll pick a product that like the entire, like a larger percentage of the population that currently is connected would need. And so I figured everybody needs to set up a web presence. And in setting up a web presence, there's a lot of underlying products. There's a domain name you have to register. There's server space on a Linux box with a control panel, traffic analysis, e-commerce tools, shopping cart solutions, etc. So we started getting into that, and that's what started out as our first business. Our first product was hosting. And then from there we added, now we have about 25 products in that particular vertical. We kept adding more and more products, vertical integration, and provided to the same customer base. Yeah.
So what makes you now not take up the recruitment product that failed that time, but now the industry seems to be?
So, good question. I guess it's I could, and who knows, maybe, but now we kind of evaluate. Obviously, over the years we've gotten really good at evaluating opportunities. And so there are lots of parameters that now opportunities fall out. So two of the ones that I spoke about before in your question, which is a space that's big enough. So it has to be big enough, right? So now we're looking at only industries that are like 50 billion, 100 billion, 150 billion in market size across the world and bigger. So I would only look at an industry first if that was the size and scope, because otherwise it doesn't make sense to put in time and effort. Then within that, if there hasn't been already substantial innovation and there are gaps that I can clearly identify, stuff that I feel needs to improve substantially, and so on and so forth. So it would have to pass through all these parameters, and so we just haven't considered it again because of some of those parameters. Directi stands for direct information back when we coined it. And it's not as you've realized, I leave naming companies to other people in my company now. But back then I was enamored by the internet, right? I remember the very first time that I actually ever connected online, and I did my first search and got this, it was some lyrics of some song back then that I downloaded from some page, and the whole notion that information from some other part, somewhere in some other corner of the world can travel within seconds and reach my computer was so fascinating. That's what I felt would completely change the world. The fact that information is now directly accessible by anybody and everybody. So that's why I called it direct information / Directi. So yeah. Yes. I mean, I can tell you that there is no company, forget ours, there's no company, including Google, Microsoft, Facebook, etc., that can claim that their entire success is dependent on the 2 people or 1 person that's at the top. That model can never scale. So I can tell you for a fact that tons and tons of our products have been brainchilds that have resulted from brainstorms, discussions, somebody coming up with a suggestion, idea, and I have made a fair share of mistakes in picking the wrong bet and then getting corrected by somebody else in the company saying, well, this doesn't make sense. Which is why we have a very free-flowing culture, and there are people who will not have a moment of hesitation in walking up to me saying, this is bullshit. You really don't know what you're talking about. And the truth is that it's true in many circumstances. And so we have an amazing team of people. You'll see many of you guys when you apply for a position at Directi. We spend a crazy amount of effort and an extremely meticulous process in identifying like the absolute best talent, but then that sort of then creates the miracles. So a lot of them, a lot of them are joint effort, etc. In many cases, the space overall is kind of decided by us. So communications as a space, is an area that I was passionate about. So I started down that path, investigated a bunch of products, then inducted a product management team and a development team. We had bunches of discussions, eliminated some stuff that we felt didn't work jointly, modified some stuff that we felt did work but needed some changes, etc. And then eventually it evolves into the final form of the product that we have.
A lot of people, very fascinated by the, so sort of I actually coined the term God of multitasking for you. And they were all pretty fascinated with the fact that how do you manage to get so much done in a day. We should probably talk about that.
That's okay. So that thanks for adding a question. More than happy. By the way, I'm happy to do this all night. So I have a morning flight, so I'm here for that. And we also have a informal tea, coffee thing downstairs. Or is it outside? Just outside?
Just outside.
Okay, perfect. So I'm around till whatever time you guys need me here, and I'm happy to answer questions, etc. But I mean, there's many things I guess I can answer. There are many ways that I can answer that question. But I think one of the things that I have been I'm a huge stickler for productivity and efficiency, like to a crazy extent, which is part of the reason why we automate everything and processify everything in the organization, etc. But that even goes for like everything that I do, like literally everything that I do. So if I find myself doing a task or an activity that I can like squeeze out some extra efficiency from, I will spend my time, work towards that, and do that. So I mean, I'll give you some examples, for instance, and some of these might sound a bit strange or bizarre, etc. But like every single place that I work at, so all my 3 homes in Mumbai, Dubai, LA, and all my offices are laid out to a precise specification in terms of exact table arrangement, my 3 monitors, the distance of the holes on which the monitors rest from each corner of the particular table. My chair, which I have custom designed, is shipped specifically to every single home and every single office. The lumens level of the lighting, like every single element in that workspace is to my specifications, because each of those elements helps me in terms of productivity. I have a custom modified Innova where the entire back portion has been taken out and converted into a desk. So there's a full-fledged, screen, keyboard tray, monitor, recliner chair with like all the relevant office ergonomics, etc. for the 15-minute commute that I have from my home to office from Juhu to office, etc. Right? So I go crazy nuts when it comes to sort of literally squeezing out efficiency in every single thing that I do, and that sort of helps me extract far more number of minutes in a day to be able to do many more things that you otherwise wouldn't get time to do, because you're reducing your efficiency by not improving and constantly enhancing your efficiency. We do the same thing with everybody in the organization. So 100% of Directi has multiple monitors, for instance. By default, working with one monitor, the moment you add a second monitor, and this has been mathematically demonstrated, it improves your productivity by 37%. The third monitor adds another 17%, but then you have to get efficient at using it. And so all of these things. So we do a lot of study on this. We have like documents that people read and come up with practices, etc. But we really literally focus a lot on trying to squeeze out as much productivity as we can and efficiency as we can within the same amount of time from everybody in the organization. So that kind of is one of my secrets, so to speak.
I think we'll close the session now. Thanks, Bhavin.
was really inspirational. And if you can imagine any of that one lesson also, I think that would be great.